The air in the downtown loft was thick with pretension. A dizzying mixture of truffle oil, imported champagne, and carefully curated superiority. This was the Curator's Table, Manhattan's most exclusive underground dinner series where food critics didn't just review meals. They determined entire restaurant destinies with a single dismissive tweet. At the head of the reclaimed barnwood table sat three tastemakers who held the culinary world by the throat. Sébastien Mercier, the French expatriate who once made a chef cry on live television, Jade Zhang, the molecular gastronomy devotee who believed food should challenge you, confuse you, and Marcus Webb, the farm-to-table evangelist who'd shut down restaurants for using the wrong tomatoes. Before them stood Yara Al Mansour, a home cook from Aleppo via a refugee camp in Jordan, now living in a cramped Queens apartment. She had no culinary degree, no restaurant experience. No Instagram following her invitation came from a non-profit trying to showcase refugee talent. She wore a simple black dress and a nervous smile. On the plates before the critics sat her offering, a dish that looked nothing like the deconstructed art pieces they expected. It was humble. Brown. Covered in a dark, glossy sauce. Sebastian prodded the meat with his fork. "What is this supposed to be? It looks heavy, overcooked." Jade leaned in, nose wrinkling. "Is that cinnamon? In a meat dish?" Bold choice. The way she said bold meant terrible. Marcus pushed his plate away. "Where's the brightness? This looks like something my grandmother made in 1952. They saw a refugee with no credentials. They saw ingredients from gas station convenience stores. They saw a dish that didn't photograph well, that couldn't be explained in a clever portmanteau. What they didn't see was the 37 attempts Yara had made to perfect this dish. Staying up until 3 a.m. after her hospital laundry shift. They didn't see the recipe she'd reconstructed from memory after fleeing with only the clothes on her back. They didn't see that this dish, Makloubeh, had fed her family for 7 generations, had been served at her wedding, had been the last meal she shared with her father before the bombs came. Yara took a quiet breath. Her mother's words echoed. Food is a love letter. Habibti. Even if they cannot read it at first, the heart understands. She was about to teach these critics a language they thought they'd already mastered. The Curator's Table wasn't designed for people like Yara. It was a monthly gathering in rotating industrial lofts where uncomfortable chairs kept guests focused on the food. The guest list was a who's who of culinary gatekeepers, bloggers with hundreds of thousands of followers, restaurant investors, journalists from Bon Appetit and the New York Times. Earlier that evening, a Brooklyn chef had served a deconstructed bodega sandwich where each component was spherified or powdered. The room murmured approvingly. A Peruvian chef presented stunning ceviche with edible flowers. Instagram phones appeared instantly. Then came Yara, introduced with pitying enthusiasm. She's going to share a traditional dish from her homeland. The applause was polite, patronizing. Yara's cooking philosophy came from a different world in Aleppo. She'd watched her mother transform their modest kitchen into the neighborhood gathering place. Her mother taught her that cooking was about layering, not just flavors but time, intention, and memory. Makloubeh embodied this completely. The name meant upside down, because after hours of careful layering, you flip the entire pot onto a platter in one dramatic motion, revealing a dome of saffron rice crusted with caramelized chicken and vegetables. It was peasant food, festival food, funeral food. The dish that announced, you are home, you are safe, you are loved. But here, surrounded by people who valued innovation over tradition, Yara felt the weight of what she was attempting. She wasn't just cooking for herself. She was cooking for every refugee told their food smelled too strong. She was cooking for every immigrant whose lunch became mockery. She was cooking for her mother, who hadn't lived to see America. The preparation had begun 2 days before. Makloubeh wasn't a dish you could rush. Yara started with a whole chicken, simmering it with cinnamon sticks, cardamom pods, bay leaves, and clove-studded onion. While the broth developed its deep, aromatic character, she prepared vegetables, eggplant and cauliflower, fried separately until golden. The rice was crucial. She washed basmati in 7 changes of water, then soaked it for 30 minutes. Rice is the foundation, her mother would say. Everything else is decoration. Most critical were the onions, sliced thin and cooked low and slow for over an hour, until they collapsed into sweet, bronze-colored jam to rush. This was to ruin everything. On the event night, in the venue's professional kitchen, Yara assembled her masterpiece with calm intensity. At the pot's bottom, she arranged fried eggplant and cauliflower in a mosaic. This would be the top when flipped. Next came bronze chicken pieces, then caramelized onions with toasted pine nuts and almonds. Then the rice, carefully spooned over, each grain separate. She poured aromatic broth over everything, the liquid seeping through layers, golden raisins scattered on top. She covered the pot tightly, set it over medium heat, then reduced to low 30 minutes of patience while rice absorbed broth, while the bottom caramelized, while elements married into one statement. Other chefs plated with tweezers and pipettes. Yara simply stood, eyes closed, listening to the pot, trusting a process older than any of them. When the timer rang, Yara performed the final nerve-wracking step. She placed a serving platter over the pot and flipped the entire thing in one smooth motion. She lifted the pot away. The dome stood perfect, crispy and golden, studded with caramelized vegetables and glistening chicken. The smell silenced nearby conversations. It was cinnamon and cardamom, but also something deeper. It smelled like safety, like home. She portioned carefully, ensuring each plate got tahdig, the prized crispy rice, along with chicken, vegetables, and spice-infused rice. She garnished with cucumber yogurt salad and fresh parsley. Compared to architectural presentations before her, Yara's plates looked aggressively simple. No height, no negative space, just a mound of food that looked like food. The servers carried plates to the critics. Yara followed, head high despite dismissive glances. The room went quiet. Sebastian cut a small piece of chicken, deliberately avoiding the crispy rice, the vegetables. Everything that made the dish whole, he wanted to isolate, analyze, dissect, rather than experience. He placed it in his mouth, expression already prepared to be underwhelmed. And then the world tilted. The chicken dissolved on his tongue. It had absorbed the broth, the spices, the thyme. The cinnamon he'd mocked didn't read as sweet, but as warm, complex, the bridge between savory and something he didn't have words for. His fork moved on its own, going back. This time he got everything. Crispy rice, eggplant, chicken, mixed together. He added yogurt sauce. His eyes closed involuntarily. The crispy rice shattered into 1,000 butter-soaked crystals. The eggplant had become silk. The yogurt cut through richness with cool tang that made him immediately want another bite. Pine nuts provided textural surprise. And underneath, that spice blend. Not overpowering, just quietly insistent that this was how food was supposed to taste. When he opened his eyes, they were different. The smugness had evaporated. Mon Dieu, he whispered. Jade had been watching Sebastian's transformation. She took her first bite with more openness, getting everything on her fork. Her reaction was even more dramatic. Jade, who approached food like a physics problem, who believed in molecular manipulation and scientific precision, confronted something her education hadn't prepared her for. The way flavors built, starting with cool yogurt, moving through aromatic rice, hitting caramelized sweetness of onions, finishing with warm spice that lingered like a good memory. It was composition. It was intentional. But it was also intuitive in a way no sous vide precision could replicate. This shouldn't work, she said, taking another bite immediately. On paper, this is too many competing elements. But somehow it's perfect. How did you balance it like this? My mother knew, Yara said simply. And her mother before her. 7 generations of knowing. Marcus had been watching his colleagues with growing unease. He was the holdout. But pride is lonely when everyone else experiences joy. He took a bite. Marcus, who'd built his brand on clean, simple flavors, found himself swimming in complexity. There was no single hero ingredient. Everything supported everything else. Even the humble raisin turned out crucial. Its tiny burst of sweetness, a necessary punctuation. He took another bite, then another. His fork moved faster. "The tahdig," he said, pointing to crispy rice. "This is genius. It's textural contrast, but it's also a reward. You're building anticipation into the dish's structure itself." "In our home," Yara said, voice stronger now, "the tahdig was always for children or guests. It was how we showed love. You give away the best part." For several minutes, only the sound of forks on plates. The entire room had gone silent, watching the three most feared critics in New York eating with an intensity that bordered on desperation. And then it happened. One piece of prized tahdig remained on the serving platter, a large golden shard of crispy rice still glistening with butter. Sebastian saw it first. His fork darted out. Jade's hand moved at the same instant. Marcus's spoon came from the left. All three utensils collided over the last piece with an audible clink that rang through the silent room. They froze, staring at each other, forks tangled like some culinary sword fight. "I believe," Sebastian said slowly, "that as the senior critic present, that piece belongs to me." "Seniority?" Jade's eyebrows shot up. "Since when? And I barely got any tahdig on my original portion." "Neither of you," Marcus interrupted, "showed this cuisine proper respect until 30 seconds ago. I think that disqualifies you." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere. Then another. Within seconds, the entire loft was roaring. Not at the critics, but at the sheer absurdity of watching three of the most powerful people in food fighting over rice like children squabbling over the last cookie. Sebastian began laughing too, a real laugh that made him release his fork. "This is ridiculous. We are ridiculous." "No," Yara said, voice cutting through the laughter with unexpected strength. "You are human. That is all. The food reminds you." She reached over, picked up the tahdig with her fingers, and broke it into 3 pieces. She handed one to each critic. They ate in silence, and the room watched as 3 faces showed the same expression. Not satisfaction, but something deeper. Something like gratitude. Jade set her fork down carefully and looked directly at Yara. "I owe you an apology. I approached your food like it was trying to impress me. But it wasn't, was it? It was trying to feed me. And I'd forgotten there was a difference." Sebastian nodded slowly. "For 20 years, I have taught chefs that food must be elevated, must transcend its origins." He gestured to empty plates. "But this transcends nothing. It is exactly what it is meant to be. And that is enough. That is everything." Marcus stood and walked over to Yara, extending his hand. When she took it, he held it, eyes bright. "My grandmother was from Lebanon. She died when I was 7. I haven't tasted anything that made me feel like I was at her table until tonight. Thank you for remembering when I had forgotten." The room erupted in applause, different from the polite approval that greeted other chefs. This was cathartic. People were standing. Some were wiping their eyes. Over the next hour, something unprecedented happened. The critics didn't leave. They stayed, asking Yara questions. "Where did you source the cardamom? How do you know when the onions are ready?" Jade pulled out her phone, taking notes. "Would you ever consider teaching a class?" "I need to write about this," Marcus said. "Not a review, a reckoning." Sebastian had a different proposal. "There is a restaurant space in the West Village, 20 seats. The owner is a friend. What if you cook the food of your home? Your real home. No modifications. Just this. Exactly this." Yara felt tears threatening. "I am not a chef. I have no training." "Training?" Sebastian waved dismissively. "You have something more valuable. You have knowledge. You have truth. You have 7 generations whispering recipes in your ear. That is not training. That is inheritance." The other presenters approached, humbled. A journalist from the Times asked for an interview. Yara looked around at all these gatekeepers who'd held doors closed for so long, now asking her to teach them how to open them. "Yes," she said, "but on one condition. If you write about this food, you must write about all of us. All the refugees, all the immigrants cooking the food of their grandmothers in tiny apartments, feeling ashamed when neighbors complain about the smell. We are not a curiosity. We are not exotic. We are not weird. We are necessary. We season your city. We flavor your neighborhoods. We are the reason your food is not boring." The room was silent again, but this time it was the silence of people hearing something true. Sebastian smiled. "Then we will write that story. The true story. Not about weird food, but about necessary food. About survival food. About love food. About the food that makes us fight over the last bite, because we finally remember what it means to be hungry for something real." 6 months later, Yara's restaurant opened. She called it Layla's, after her mother. There was no menu, just whatever Yara cooked that day, served family style. 20 seats. But the waiting list was hundreds long. The critics who mocked her became her most ardent defenders. Sebastian wrote, "The Death of Weird and the Birth of Wonder," that went viral. Marcus's profile of Yara was nominated for a James Beard Award. But the real success wasn't measured in reviews. It was measured in faces of people who walked into Layla's and burst into tears because they hadn't tasted their grandmother's cooking in 15 years. It was measured in second-generation kids who'd been embarrassed by their parents' food, now bringing friends and saying with pride, "This is where I'm from." And it was measured in a quiet moment, late one night after service, when Yara sat alone with a small plate of Makloubeh, eating the tahdig she'd saved for herself, and whispered to her mother's ghost, "I kept my promise, I carried it forward. They finally learned to taste it." The story of Yara Al Mansour and her weird food is a powerful reminder that gatekeepers are not guardians. They're just people who forgot to be hungry. It's about the difference between impressive and important, between elevated and honest, between innovation and inheritance. It's about how the most revolutionary act in a world obsessed with the new is to cook the old exactly as it was meant to be cooked, and trust that truth is its own defense. And it's about how sometimes the highest compliment a dish can receive isn't a Michelin star or a rave review. Sometimes it's just 3 powerful people, their sophistication abandoned, fighting over the last bite like children who finally come home. So what do you think? Have you ever had food that changed what you thought was possible? Have you ever tasted something that made you remember who you were before the world told you who to be? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of culinary justice, this tale of a refugee who became a teacher, make sure to subscribe for more stories of underdogs who didn't just win, but transformed the entire game. Because the best food doesn't just fill your stomach. It fills the holes in your memory. It rebuilds the homes you lost. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it makes even the most cynical critics remember what it means to be grateful for the last bite.